Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be talking with Hannalie Marsh, MD for Wirecard Solutions South Africa, looking after the Sub-Saharan African region. Wirecard offers an innovative digital platform for cashless payments that can be customized to any industry and business. Their digital platform enables businesses to issue their own payment solutions, accept customer payments, analyze and monetize their data, and obtain financing. Wirecard is listed on the DAX and uses an integrated B2B2C approach. Their profile will be linked in the description box below. Hi, Hannalie. Thanks for joining me on this podcast. How have the last couple of weeks been for you? How are you doing?
Hi, Stacey. No, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure. The past few weeks have been super interesting. We've all had to adjust to a whole host of new ways of doing things and new things of doing. So, for example, I've never previously recorded a podcast, so that's a new one for the books.
Welcome.
But I think that is the great thing around these crisis situations is it challenges us in terms of what we have been spending our time and energy on, and it gives us, it opens our eyes to what we could be doing. So it's been fascinating, especially with two young kids at home and us working at full speed. But
how's that balance been?
Well, I think anyone that tells you it's easy would be lying. It's super difficult with two kids under 5 at home and them not understanding either what is happening in terms of the world being different. So mommy and daddy are both at home, but they are both glued to computer screens for the bulk of the day. And so that's been challenging. We have to do a lot of negotiation around quiet time for things like podcasts. But on the other hand, it's been really interesting to see how they've adjusted, how they go through emotions that I think all of us go through, and also to get exposed to some of their day-to-day routines. Many of the school sends out updates and lessons, and all of the extramurals do the same thing. So it's been great to see some of the day-to-day activities that you normally are not exposed to. So it's been interesting, super interesting.
Let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me about your journey to becoming MD at Wirecard?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey or route to get here. In fact, someone once told me that I have quite a colorful CV, so I don't think it's the traditional one. When I was a little girl and for the bulk of my school career, I was always going to be a medical doctor. And then in my matric year, my rebellious side kicked in and I opted to spend a year overseas, which as many years ago was not the common thing to do. So I spent a year in Belgium as an au pair,
How was that?
as a bit of a gap year. And it was really amazing in the sense that, firstly, it was my first ever time on a commercial airline. The kids of today don't understand the notion that the first time you get on a plane is at the age of 18. But it was my first time on a commercial airline.
So you had never even traveled domestically within South Africa?
No, in those years, it was almost as expensive to fly between Cape Town and Joburg as it was to fly to Europe.
Gotcha.
So I'd been on smaller aircraft as part of, companies or things like that, but definitely not on anything commercial. So it was a huge shock for me to go into the big world on a commercial airline, flying into a foreign country.
I can imagine.
Being greeted by a French lady with a poodle under her arm. It was definitely something super interesting. But, essentially what happened there is I fell in love with traveling and languages and, exploring the world. And that hasn't gone away, which is the one really, tough thing around the current crisis is to not have the opportunity to do some of that. But I ended up in hospital just before I came back with my appendix, and I decided in hospital that I was not going to become a doctor. And when I came back, I spent a few extra months working in the tourism industry, which I absolutely loved. And in the end, I studied BCom marketing and communication management. Also, really enjoyed my degree and enjoyed being in the commercial side, and actually quite enjoyed the financial side. So I had some additional financial subjects. And in my final year, Nedbank was busy recruiting for their first major grad program, and I was one of the lucky chosen ones to be recruited onto the Nedbank grad program.
How did your parents take you not wanting to be a doctor anymore? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, no, that was an interesting one. My mom comes out of the medical field. She's a radiographer. And it was a big shock because in those days you became, a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, and all of the traditional roles. But they were very comfortable in the end in terms of my decision. And, it took a fundamentally different turn when I ended up at the bank. Marketing degree in a tech and operations division for acquiring in a bank was a bit of a departure from what I'd expected to do with my marketing degree. So I was literally put into the banking industry at the deep end of having to do hosted integrations and point of sale integrations and testing to get to understand how this very intricate industry works. So I had a phenomenal time at Nedbank and met some incredible people, and then moved over to Standard Bank to join the smart card team, as it was called right in the beginning. So essentially the chip card team when it was really in the early stages. In fact, it was just before the launch of the first ever chip card in South Africa. So really exciting times. And I had incredible years at Standard Bank working in new technology in the card division. So getting exposed to a whole host of new technologies, including things like some of the loyalty programs, contactless transactions, even some of the e-commerce things that we use every day now, things like 3D Secure, in terms of online shopping. So Standard Bank was another phenomenal part of my career in terms of introduction to some of the really nitty-gritty technical side of financial services.
Were most of the products at beta phase or were they already launched?
Yeah, so as I said, I joined the smart card team as we were in final testing for launch of the first ever credit card or chip credit card. So it was really in the detail. And my role has always been a bit of a hybrid. I studied marketing, not tech. So I was definitely not the techie, but I've always had this role as which I call a translator role. So one foot in the technical side and one foot in the business side, sort of making sure that these things translate correctly from a technical perspective into the commercial side of the business, and I've really enjoyed that role. So I'm not a techie, but I'm happy to speak some tech in terms of this industry. And then at the time decided to make a big change and a big personal change and move down to Cape Town. From Joburg or Pretoria side, and in the move, I decided as well that I wanted to play around a bit with my dream from when I was in Belgium, and to look at going into tourism. So I was doing some consulting still for the bank, but at the same time, I started a tourism business called Blue Elephant, which I absolutely loved. And I spent a couple of years doing that full time, essentially promoting South Africa and Africa as a destination for foreign tourists. So it really is still something that's very close to my heart. And I was involved in Blue Elephant in some way or form for the better part of 10 years. It was later sold to an ex-colleague of mine and a very dear friend who still runs the business today. So Blue Elephant is still out there. But it was a really fascinating venture out of corporate and true big banking corporate into sort of a startup business, being a bit of entrepreneurial. And I got to see just how difficult it is out there in terms of starting something from scratch. So it was something that definitely was a huge eye-opener. And then financial services is an interesting industry. It doesn't easily let you go. It's such a tight-knit community, and it's not something that you generally study at university. So, you have to learn on the job. And while I was busy with Blue Elephant, I had a phone call from MasterCard, and where they asked me to join them on some projects to assist with the execution of some of the advanced payment technology projects.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was supposed to join them for a year, but 5 really good years later, I was there exposed to advanced payment projects across the continent. It was really great to be able to travel to some of the countries and see the nuances and the differences, and to interact with so many of the continental clients. And also to be exposed, obviously, to such an amazing global company. It was a phenomenal time to learn around business globally, and to learn how to interact with businesses even on our continent, because we all know that Africa is not a country, but a lot of other people still don't understand that. So
I get that all the time.
Exactly.
When I was living in the US, they would refer to where I lived as the country Africa.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and I still have to sometimes explain that to people. So that was a great time as well. And then it was time to not commute to Joburg anymore. And I joined a company in Cape Town called Achievement Awards Group, company that specializes in recognition, reward, and loyalty programs. Also fascinating change for me, going back into sort of the loyalty space, but being able to also work in a mid-sized organization with global customers, and one where you need to be able to get your hands dirty and dovetail across multiple functions. And it was actually the Achievement Awards Group where I actually found, I think, my true calling. For all the years prior to that, I was in a very much the technical side of business and payments, and sort of project management, business analysis, and product management. And I didn't actually realize that I'm more naturally a right brain and an intuitive. So I was exposed a lot more to strategy and some of those bigger picture thinking initiatives at AA Group, which fundamentally changed my career from there. It was also there that I, for the first time since I studied, was exposed to marketing from a management perspective. So I took over the marketing function there, which I absolutely adored, and I still miss today having access to some of the creative juices flowing and some of the creative discussions, on a day-to-day basis. But it was really great to be able to be in the industry that I actually studied to be in the first place. But then I joined Wirecard about 4 years ago, and they joined specifically to help with strategic development for the organization throughout Africa, but also to assist with some of the operational structuring. And that quickly then, over the last couple of years, morphed into more bespoke strategic development. Later, I took over as general manager, and for the last 18 months or so, I've been MD for the Sub-Saharan region. It's a phenomenal company to work for. It's a global company, so the exposure is fantastic in terms of projects elsewhere in the world, and it's also great for us to be the showcase of what Africa can bring into a global organization. So that's in a quick nutshell, but not so short version of my story.
What an interesting story, though. You never had your generic path to becoming MD of a fintech company as well. I would just love to know, so you started Blue Elephant Collective kind of as a side hustle, and then it grew, and then you closed that chapter. What lessons did you learn from building Blue Elephant Collective?
Yeah, so I mean, Blue was a phenomenal lesson in many ways. I think we often have a picture in our head of what something is like from what you see other people do, so it seems really simple, or it seems really luxurious, or, like we just have the picture in our heads, and it's not necessarily always the reality. So the one thing I learned there is that having a truly entrepreneurial sense, so in your gut being an entrepreneur, is not something that you can force It's something that certain people are born with. And I, for one, for example, am not that. I mean, I have a lot of entrepreneurial thinking, and I can definitely see some of the patterns that emerge in small businesses. And I really enjoy helping small businesses in terms of their strategic development. But having the stomach to really build something as a true entrepreneur does, I, for example, realized with Blue Elephant that I did not have that. It was a big lesson for me. That was one of them. And I take my hats off to true entrepreneurs every day when I meet them. The second one was that, and this is true, I think, in most businesses, is that we often think that it's better if you do things yourself because you know how to do it. You think you know better. It's quicker to do it yourself, or whatever all of those excuses are that we find for not delegating. But Blue Elephant actually started doing really well when I was taken out of the day-to-day operations. So when I started doing some of the work with MasterCard and I wasn't available every day in the office to run the day-to-day operations, and I handed that over to the team in the office, the business flourished.
What do you think the reason for that was?
Well, I think two things. One, it gave me time to focus on the strategic components, which is clearly where I was better. And secondly, it allowed people to do things in their natural flow. And if your natural flow is to be really good at operations, you are always going to be better than someone else who tries to force it. So that was a big lesson for me, is that the fact that you can do it doesn't mean you have to or you should be doing it. There are other people probably much better than you. And the second one is that sometimes by giving away control, I mean, I won't say losing control because that sounds negative, but by giving away control, you actually gain control. And it's very difficult for most of the A types out there, and for people that are, quite particular about things, how things need to get done. But delegating and being able to delegate truly is a skill, and it's one that, I think sometimes we learn too late.
Definitely. We were having a conversation a couple days ago about how long it took South Africa to adopt onto the cardless methods of payments. What do you think is the reason it took South Africa so long to adopt this method of payment?
Yeah, so South Africa is an interesting one in terms of adoption. So in most instances, from a financial services perspective, we are definitely seen as first world, and that remains the case. And I don't believe that South Africa specifically takes longer than anyone else. What I do believe is that adoption of new technology, especially in sort of the more formal and conservative industries such as payments, takes longer than you think. And the example that I like to use on this is the fact that we did the first contactless transaction in South Africa in 2005 already. And I mean, contactless has been available in some way or form since then, but not nearly to the mass adoption rate. And I mean, I chuckle about that now if I think about the fact that we've spent over the last 10 years time and effort and marketing effort and training effort to get people to adopt, for example, contactless transacting in retail. And you have a virus that breaks out in the world, and suddenly contactless is the next best thing. So this virus has really made huge inroads in terms of acceptance methods and contactless acceptance methods. And in some areas more than others, but definitely in some of the global, competitors or in other global markets, it's made huge inroads into the removal or the reduction of cash usage as well. I'm not sure if you'll see the same rate necessarily in Africa, but for example, I spoke to some of my colleagues in Germany this morning, and you are now not allowed to transact in retail in Germany in any other way or form as contactless.
Oh, wow, that makes sense, though.
But I mean, it's quite surprising because again, we sometimes think that we are behind. But for example, South Africa is much better equipped for cashless transacting than what, for example, Germany was.
How so?
in South Africa, it's very possible for you to be able to get around your day-to-day business in general without having to have cash on hand. You can use, QR payments, you can use your card anywhere, basically. It's accepted. It's an acceptable means of payment, even for low-value transactions, where in Germany, up until before the virus, if you wanted to pay for your taxi with a credit card, you would get a look from the taxi driver. It is there very common to transact in cash. It was a cultural thing, I think, to a large degree, and that has now also been forced to change. So I don't think, as I said, South Africa is slow at adopting. I just think that adoption of major turnkey projects and solutions take longer than we think.
Then what makes some markets easier to adopt new technologies than others?
I mean, that is one of the interesting things that I learned when I was at Mastercard as well. So in South Africa, for example, in comparative to some of the countries that had not been online yet with card payments or point of sales and the sort of electronic means of payment, is that invariably, if you've been doing something for longer, you have much more legacy. And that legacy generally makes you slow, and it makes it expensive for you to change. So when we were implementing projects and advanced technology projects in new markets in Africa, when I was at Mastercard, you could get a bank going from zero card acceptance to full EMV acceptance within months, where it took us years here because of the legacy. So I think the beauty of being new to things means that you can generally be quicker, because someone else has learned all the hard lessons, and the updated versions are already available for you to use. And secondly, you don't have to retrofit or integrate into any of the existing or back-end legacy systems.
How do you see FinTech changing due to social distancing? This can be from a product perspective or how consumers will use the technology differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are going to see quite a few things change over the next couple of months. I think a lot of them have changed already. The first one is that we have to fundamentally reassess where we were focusing our attention. So, Wirecard is also seen as a fintech. We happen to be 20 years old and in 26 countries, but the reality is it is also still seen as a fintech, and we've had to do exactly the same thing. So take the plan and reassess to see, are the markets that we were targeting going to look exactly the same way? Are the partners that we were partnering with the right partners for what the new market or the new normal will look like? So fintech is going to be crucial now, I think, for many of the larger players or the more settled players in trying to adjust trajectory quickly, because you're going to have to make changes. Things are not going to be as they were before. There will be some fundamental shifts that are being put in place specifically to cater for this period that we're in now, this sort of crisis period. But we've all seen before that once you've had something to this magnitude, you don't ever go back to 100% of what it was before. So in Cape Town, for example, all of us have been through the scare of day zero. Even though we are predominantly out of it now, I don't think we look at water the same way as we did before day zero. And I think the same is going to be true for post-corona. Is that we may go back to some of the things that we used to do and have big family braais and whatever, but there are other things that we will definitely do differently. And I think those are the things where fintechs will be able to help us adjust our offering to the market much quicker. I also do believe that there'll be a bit of consolidation and that we will have to think wisely around, how many new companies can be supported, how can we collaborate perhaps closer, consolidate to create stronger offerings, and then bring ultimately more digitized solutions to the market, because that's not going to go away.
If my dream is to become MD of a fintech company one day, what advice do you have for those wanting to climb the corporate ladder?
Sure, that's a really good question. There are a few that sort of come to mind for me. The one is that, and some of these things are often said, but they remain true, is that you need to surround yourself with the right people. It's a highly complex environment. It's a fast-paced and high-change environment, and therefore it's impossible for one person to be able to understand all components of the business. So you need to make sure that you have the right team around you. I think more so in business than ever before, having the right partnerships will be crucial. So start building those relationships already now. Having a network of the right people is really, really important. Another example that I like to use is this notion that says that we are all the average of the 4 people we spend most of our time with.
I love that.
So, in reality, what that means is that if you want to aspire to being in a leadership position or in a management position, make sure you start spending time with people that hold those positions, that you can have the conversations and start building those networks. We underestimate the fact that, you can't look up and stay down there. You need to work your way up bit by bit. So aspire to including more and more people in your network of influence that have that experience. I don't believe it's possible in the business world of today to be anywhere without mentors, coaches, sponsors, and the people that can help equip you with the skills that you need to be able to make decisions, to do some introspection on what you need in terms of your own development. So make sure that you have many of those.
What's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
Okay, so as we know, there are the 3 main ones. So the coach is typically what you would relate to a sports coach. So someone that teaches you skills, but they use your abilities. So it's your abilities. They just hone your abilities. So they're not specifically changing anything in you. They're just bringing out the best in you. And I think coaches are becoming really important. And it's one of the industries I think that will be doing well in terms of this virtual environment, because you can now have a coach basically anywhere in the world without any severe impact. Mentors are people that have actual experience in your field and in your industry. So people that you can ask specific questions of, and they can tell you how to deal with specific situations. So I have multiple mentors for different topics. Some of them are in my industry. Some of them have experience in skills that I need. So you don't have to just have one, and they could be anything from a spouse to a sibling to an ex-boss or someone. It really is, you could find mentors all over the show. And then sponsors, which is the least known of the 3, is something that is possibly more prevalent in corporate, but it's where someone really notices specific talent in you, or really believes in your abilities, and they basically take you under their wing and they help you through the organization, or help you navigate your career in the organization. And those are the more difficult ones to spot, but there are definitely people out there that like to invest in talent. And if you can find a good sponsor in a corporate environment, that will always be a really positive thing for your career development.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was so helpful. I really, really appreciate that. And thanks for joining me on this podcast. Where can those find you on social media? What's your handle?
So I'm not particularly strong on all of the different social media channels. So work-related, it will be on LinkedIn predominantly. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. That's the one where I will be visible from a work perspective. So Hannalie Marsh on LinkedIn is the main one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks for taking the time, and stay safe during this crisis. And thank you for bringing us all these interesting perspectives.
Of course. Thank you for listening to Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, or you yourself are looking for a new exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.